Hello and welcome to another episode of News from the Heart. I'm Heather George, and in a minute we're going to talk to Swamiji about a topic that I think will become ever more interesting as you watch these blog segments. Swamiji is a spiritual teacher, and on YouTube you'll see many of our videos that come from the meditation hall where he's speaking about our spiritual practice here at the Movement Center and in our lineage. In addition to that, we're doing this blog now, and we're giving him a platform to talk about some of his more personal opinions and beliefs, which he readily shares with his students, and which not everybody agrees with. He can be a little controversial in some people's opinions. I think I've even seen some people get a little upset with some of his stronger views in politics or what's going on in the world. And this is a venue for him to talk about those things. And I wanted to ask him today in this segment about how he deals with the controversy that maybe he sparks with some of his personal views and in our blog and in his life. So I hope you enjoy this segment of News from the Heart. Your opinions around controversial topics. So
don't I get to have them?
I think that you do, and I think most of your students, whether they agree with your personal opinions or not, can separate that. Having a blog, however, going out into the world and sharing these personal opinions with people who aren't your students, understanding how to separate.
Here's the thing. First of all, I have a very specific experience that has, informed my life completely. I grew up a Catholic. I was told that my purpose in life was to know, love, and serve God. I was also taught that of all of the three virtues, that charity was the first. I was taught to love my neighbor as myself. And in large measure, I took this to heart, particularly as I moved into college, and found even in the early part of my experience in college, that there was no pathway that I was being exposed to at the university that was really going to facilitate the kind of effort that I thought, was appropriate to making my life, a true and valuable life. So I turned increasingly to political activism in two areas. One was the civil rights movement. I felt then, I feel now. There is a tremendous amount of discrimination that goes on in the United States that is completely unjust and totally inappropriate to a civilized society. And I find this kind of discrimination, wherever it exists, I find it repugnant. There is nothing about discrimination, racially or gender-based, that has anything to do with any spirituality, period. Because, first of all, we know that race is a completely superficial circumstance. It is an expression of an adaptation to a place and time. But all of us genetically, all the people on earth today are genetically Homo sapiens. So, we know that isn't a real issue. But still, rich people, in my opinion, support many different issues like abortion or gay marriage, which are completely red herring issues, in order to distract people. And they also engage Christian churches and to some degree Jewish synagogues, Jewish communities in the United States. They engage them to, push these discriminatory agendas in order to confuse people and distract them from the really significant public issues of the day, one of which we just spoke about. The most important issue in my mind is the one we just spoke about, which is income inequality. You know, corporations don't want us to look at where our money is going. And if we understood the degree to which, you know, our tax dollars are being leaked back into corporate hands in the United States, we would be appalled. And because, you know, really and truly, it is our physical health and well-being, our retirement money, and the education of our children, which is being completely given away to the 1%. And this is very disheartening. So, you know, I feel like every single human life is fundamentally valuable. You know, and I feel like our responsibility is not to the unborn. Our responsibility is to the born, the people who have a life. And, you know, our responsibility is to value and nurture that life to the degree that that particular life, full of divine talent, can be expressed in the world for the benefit of the whole. I think, you know, when I once spoke with my parents about abortion, and I said, if you guys ever saw a slum in Bombay or a slum in Sao Paulo, if you ever saw a slum anywhere, and you saw the water that the people there have to drink, you know, that the pregnant mothers drink, and that the infants drink, and that the babies drink, if you saw the food that they have to eat, if you saw the poisons in their environment and the dangers that they're constantly exposed to, you know, you would not be so in favor of, you know, unbridled population growth in the world. And they said to me, oh, you know, we don't care what happens to a kid after they're born. We only care that this life needs to be manifest. And after that, it's up to God what happens to that person. I think that is the biggest bunch of bullshit I ever heard in my entire life, but that is definitely the line that anti-abortion people use when talking about this topic.
One of the controversial topics that maybe, so my question then is, if someone believes in Christianity, believes in Jesus, has a strong faith in that, is it still possible for them to come here and study and have a relationship with you? Or do you think by you expressing these personal views, you're creating a separation with people, an inability for them to?
Well, I think, you know, what I'm doing is informing people of who I am and what I think about, and then it's up to them to decide whether they want to come and study here or not. And, you know, I am not pushing any religious agenda, and you will, for the most part.
And I was just using religion as an example.
Never,
maybe how they feel about the.
You will never hear me speak in the meditation hall, sometimes if it impacts a person's spiritual growth. But, you know, you'll never hear me speak about political or economic topics. But here's the thing, and this is totally, for me, important. I strongly feel that respect is respect for other human beings. Respect for all human beings is a fundamental spiritual principle. And, you know, I will speak to that in whatever way I find it appropriate and necessary at any place or time. You know, I feel like respect for diversity is essential, because if we are growing ever more closely toward God, and as we discover our own essence, what we are going to discover is that there is tremendous and unexpected potential within human beings, within every human being, that it's necessary for us to honor. And I think all of our bigotry, all of our attitudes, all of our tensions, all of the completely imaginary nonsense that we perpetuate within ourselves that, blocks our capacity to communicate with our total environment, these tensions, these delusions must be uprooted within ourselves and clarified for the sake of our own personal spiritual development. And so, whatever it takes. I also live and have lived my entire adult life in, the center of a community of at least 500 people. In the world, in worldly terms, we're tiny. This place is nothing, Joel Olstein, or whatever his name is, pulls 80,000 people every Sunday to the old Astrodome in Houston. And there's another guy in Florida who pulls 30,000 people every Sunday. I mean, if I saw 500 people, I'd probably freak out. My goal is not to set the world on fire.
And even in those 500 people, the diversity to me is so amazing. And that's, I guess, what I'm pointing to is I look at how many different people, conservative, liberal, every color under the rainbow, every sexual orientation, rich, poor, that can sit with you. And I hear you talk about things that I would say a large percentage of those people could downright just disagree with your personal opinions on.
Well, and they're welcome. They're totally welcome to.
But because of your level of respect, because of your openness and willingness for people to have that difference.
But I do want to stand, in the middle of my own world and my own value system, because I really deeply believe it is essential that we look at our fellow human beings with respect. And the only way we are ever going to bridge the cultural differences that exist between human beings and confront the extraordinary environmental challenges that we are faced with on many levels and succeed in creating a new culture and a new system of sustainability on this planet, the only way that is really going to ever work is if we fundamentally respect each other and learn to appreciate and deal with our differences. Otherwise, what we're doing is condemning ourselves to our past. And the past I'm referring to is the past in which the predominant business model, is kill people and steal their shit. That is a business model which is destructive of every fineness that exists in human beings. It is destructive of, the value systems that all religions say they espouse. And it portends a very short and ugly future for humanity on the face of the earth. So I'm doing this blog.
So you're doing this blog because sharing your personal opinions aside from, or always connected to, but still sort of aside from your role as a spiritual teacher. Like you said, you keep that stuff out of the hall, out of the meditation hall where you speak to us. But to sit here and have this venue to speak is an opportunity for people to be able to respect.
Well, a lot of times people ask me questions related to politics and economics and culture that, I want to have the opportunity to speak to as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And whether you all agree with them or not, I hope that you can respect Swamiji for having them. I love hearing your personal stuff, whether I agree with it or not, because you are my teacher, because I can see how you're navigating the world and these heated topics and subjects and issues going on, and then taking it into your practice. I may do it differently, and you give me space to do that, and I appreciate that. I imagine it's hard as the teacher, though, especially when people start kicking and moaning about disagreeing with.
Well, it's, it's a big waste of energy. First of all, I'm not uninformed. And the second thing is, I mean, the reason why I'm speaking is because I exactly want to encourage people to develop their own perspective. And I want people to start to consider these topics because as spiritual people, we still have to interact with the world every single day. And in fact, our spiritual practice is not a meditative disengagement from the world, but rather an energetic engagement. So, it's important and appropriate for spiritual people to, discuss and consider political topics. And I realize that sometimes I am criticized by the non-dualists and the Advaita community and other people in the, a sort of Eastern-based spiritual arena because I have, comments about the world around me. But the fact of the matter is, we all live in the same world, and my complaint about those people is they live in denial. And that's perfectly fine with me for anybody who wants to live in denial. But as a leader of a community of people who live in the world and have to deal with the world on a daily basis in order to survive, and flourish, I am going to speak about, the appropriate perspective for, relating to our society and our culture and our politics and the life that we are sharing.
And that's why we have News from the Heart. So I thank you all for joining us in our blog. I hope you enjoy all the spicy topics that we come up with talking about here, and whether you agree with them or not, get something out of this to take back into your lives and your spiritual practice. Thank you.